So after a 3-game losing streak marred by poor play, bad coaching, and just a lack of intensity, there's a new report that the Eagles organization is concerned about Jalen Hurts' leadership. Come on, are we buying that? Plus the proof that the Birds are the ones ruining the franchise QB. So let's talk about it, but first, let's run it. Hey guys, so how about we start with a little positivity? Like Monday being the first game without any expected rain since November 5th. And also the first time the Birds will have worn their black unis with midnight green helmets since Lane Johnson caught a touchdown pass from Jalen. Plus some more good news is that Devonta Maddox has a good chance to play after getting in multiple practices and looking really promising, so could potentially have him back on the defense. Of course, while that will help defensive play caller Matt Patricia, life will get a little harder if he's without his 2 starting linebackers, since both Zach Cunningham and Nicholas Morrow haven't been full participants, so something to continue to monitor. Also, Landon Dickerson is expected to be out against New York after having the thumb surgery, meaning Sua Opeta will slide over and fill in at left guard since Cam Jurgens has now gotten in a few practices ahead of the matchup. And at least worth keeping an eye on Smitty, who's been dealing with a knee, but I'd expect him to give it a go. Because this team's committed, especially after Jalen Hurts made the comments after the Birds lost to the Seahawks saying, "We need to be more committed," which confused some vets like Brandon Graham, but then QB1 came back earlier this week to clarify.
When I say we, I mean me, because I'm the point guard out there. I'm the one that makes everything go, and I'm the guy that everyone trusts in to do and set the pace for everything. That's in how I play. That's in my leadership. That's in every aspect of the game, and that comes with the shoes that I walk in. And so this is a challenge to myself, and you challenge yourself and you challenge the people around you. I set the tone. I'm the temperature. I set the temperature for the room. I set all of that. And I'm challenging myself to be better in all aspects. I know the standard I hold myself to, and I put that standard out there. And so the reality is everybody else holds me to that standard too. But the only one that matters is my teammates. The only one that matters is my coaches. And me being my own biggest critic, that one matters a lot bit as well. And so just challenging myself to be everything I need to be for this team.
All right, cool. You know what? I can appreciate that. And like I've talked about previously, QB1's made some awful reads and really poor decisions at times, so naturally he deserves some blame. However, according to the Philly Inquirer's Jeff McClain, the Eagles have some internal concern about the 25-year-old, saying they want their franchise quarterback to be authentic, but they also want him to open himself up a little more in the locker room and have a more outward leadership style when it's needed during difficult stretches. Okay, first off, I guess my question is, are we really buying that? And sure, Jalen can be pretty stoic at times, but the potential regression isn't all on him. Or so the Ringer's Ben Solak thinks, writing, "For the first 10 weeks of the season, nothing was wrong with the Eagles' offense, or so it seemed. The Eagles were 3rd in expected points added per drive overall. They were 4th in offensive success rate. Their passing offense was 15th, but they were 1st in the run. With that pesky tush push in hand to always score in the red area, they were 2nd only to the Dolphins in points per drive. However, since coming back from the bye, they've been terribly average, ranking middle of the pack or worse in success rate, efficiency, and points per drive." I know, that's why we've been saying for weeks they need to get it fixed. So Ben asked the question, why did the offensive downturn happen? I mean, sure, losing Dallas Goedert for 3 weeks certainly didn't help, and Jalen Hurts may have been hampered by his illness Monday versus the Seahawks, or heck, maybe it was just the toughest stretch of games for any NFL team this season that caused it. Yet while those areas probably play a factor, my personal thought is that it could be more of a schematic problem of Sirianni's offense combined with Brian Johnson's play calling.
Duh.
Okay, yeah, I know it's pretty obvious, but how dangerous is this combo really? Well, Solak would argue quite a bit, because despite Shane Steichen continuing to thrive in Indianapolis with Gardner Minshew at the helm, and half the pieces the Eagles have at their disposal, as we all know, Philly makes things look really difficult at times. With Ben going so far to say the Eagles don't really have an offensive system, and that's why things have felt different this season. Now, it's worth noting that the Birds were very good on offense last year, and they didn't seem to have a system then either. Since the 2022 Eagles ran a shockingly small number of plays from a shockingly small number of formations. For example, take a look at this graph showing how many passes each team has called from under center, and notice the stair-stepping until we get to the Philly cliff. I mean, that difference is crazy. In fact, the Birds have only gone under center 3 times to throw the football all season.
That's shocking.
Yeah, it's not great. Although I get it if you're saying, then why were we so effective last season? Because, the offense was just about the same with little variations of plays from the gun. Here's the deal though, whether it's Jalen protecting himself or the coaches asking for caution, or Jalen's injury that just naturally hampered him earlier in the season, it's turned the Eagles into a team that isn't a quarterback run team. Like Solak shared, only 2 quarterbacks have more designed rushes this season than Hurts, Lamar Jackson and Taysom Hill, who doesn't really count. But at 5.3 yards per carry, Hurts has been one of the least effective rushing quarterbacks by yards gained. His success rate of 41% is below average, falling in line with Josh Dobbs and Jordan Love. Okay, obviously I don't have to tell you that's not very good, but let's be honest, Hurts just doesn't look the same that he did last year, and I'd argue even before his knee injury that he wasn't moving the same like he did last season. So unfortunately, the one-time advantage the Eagles had when running Hurts has now turned into a bit of a disadvantage. And sure, on principle, it makes sense that you continue to dial up runs for Hurts, but when that's not working and he lacks the explosiveness or willingness or whatever it is, you're really just making life easier on the defense. Of course, Jalen not being an effective runner isn't the only problem, because remember, like we just talked about, the Colts have been effective going mostly from the gun, and Minshew doesn't even present a threat to keep the ball. So yeah, what is it then? Well, the main issue with Sirianni's scheme, or lack of scheme, is simplicity. As Ben wrote, gun, spread, no motion, simple route trees. If any of you went to a high school football game this year in your local area, that's probably the offense you saw. It's an offense built to force defenders into space and conflict. Sounds good, right? In a vacuum, sure, but the simplicity of it is starting to handicap the Eagles' offense, particularly Hurts. When you live off of conditional pre-snap reads, if this, do that, you lose the ability to actually process in real time. Okay, so let's take a look at an example, and one that we're probably all too familiar with. The 3rd and 8 versus Seattle, where Jalen takes the deep shot to AJ, and 11 even admitted after the game the play design was to go to him. Which sure, isn't the worst thing to give Brown a chance, but if the offense relied more on processing in real time, surely Jalen would have hit Smitty for the wide open first down. And take another one Ben shared that should have gone to Devonta. Hurts' read is the safety love. Once he turns his back to Smith to chase Quez upfield, the ball should be going to Smith. But Hurts is locked in. This is a shot play, he has a speed receiver, and there's no post safety. So he's not wrong to uncork this throw by the letter of the law, but the spirit of the down and distance as well as the way the play actually reads out on the field is not wise to throw it. Look, let me stop and say it's easy to play armchair quarterback, and you guys know I'm not any sort of expert film analyst, but Solak has several other fascinating points in the article, so I've got a link in the description if you want to check it out. Ultimately though, the argument he's making is that in the current Johnson offense, the Eagles are becoming even simpler and even more polarized. Their spread rates, shotgun rates, and motion rates are all more extreme this season than they were last season. They're trying to make the easy buttons even easier, but defenses have caught up to the gag. With Ben saying, if the Eagles decide philosophically to be a quarterback run team with spread RPOs, that's fine. Commit to that. Get Hurts healthy and sell out for the running game. If they decide philosophically to play a matchup passing game that funnels targets to Brown and Smith, that's fine. Commit to that. Start putting those guys in motion, give them easy targets, and let them dominate. But become something. The worst thing Philadelphia could do in the final stretch of the season and into January is continue doing what they've always done just because it worked in the past. It's an offense that belongs to a coordinator who is gone, and running it isn't working. It's time to innovate, evolve, and improve, or continue to be one of the league's most disappointing offenses. Okay, what do you guys think? I feel like Ben made a ton of great points, and hopefully we do see a change. And I also brought in Anthony DeBona from Outside the Birds to get his thoughts on how the Eagles are using Jalen. And I've asked you, I guess, multiple weeks we had the conversation of, what is the Eagles' identity, the offensive scheme, or the lack thereof. Curious just your main initial takeaways from reading that article.
It's concerning because I really respect Benjamin's work and a lot of what he does. I mean, I've been following him for years, and to see him, I mean, he's basically saying what we've all been thinking. I mean, he's putting it really eloquently into the article. He's putting it putting context of the numbers, and it's concerning because he's basically what I got out of that article is the Eagles kind of turned Jalen Hurts into a robot where he sees one thing, he does one thing, and they're not really letting him kind of freestyle and go about it on his own. He's kind of just going with the flow, I guess, but at the same time, it's almost all predetermined to where there's questions regarding his decision-making, like with the interceptions against the Seahawks. Those were concerning, and it was kind of like they say, oh, single high, let it fly, whatever. But these teams realize, and they're clearly catching on. I mean, they made a big deal about Christian McCaffrey seeing that, basically calling out the play before it happened. So it's just a lot of concerning things, and it's definitely not a good sign, and I feel like they need to change things, but there's only so much you could change this far into the season.
You talk about Jalen Hurts here, and we're looking at him now as, He had a great last season, naturally getting the contract. I felt it was well-deserved. There's some potential, he can make a lot of plays. But are the Eagles ruining Jalen Hurts? Like, are we watching that unfold before our eyes? Do you think that this staff, this coaching staff with Brian Johnson or Sirianni, whatever the scheme falls and the play calling, are they really handicapping him so much to where if they're not careful, they're going to ruin him?
It's getting into that territory. It's starting to kind of remind a lot of people of what happened with Carson Wentz, where, he doesn't really, not dealing with the same amount of injuries, but you kind of saw the turnovers become a problem, and it's been a problem all season long. I feel like I kind of tweeted about it earlier in the year and got a lot of flack for it. But at the same time, it's been a pattern that's carried out throughout the whole season. And last week was really bad. That might have been the worst couple of throws that he's thrown, and decisions, especially when me, you, and everybody else can point to these obvious open targets. And I don't know, like we alluded to, I don't know if it's necessarily the scheme that's doing it or if it's Jalen that's doing it. I think it's a combination of both. I don't think either side is helping each other. And I feel like last year with Shane Steichen, he was kind of the glue that held it all together, where you see what he's doing now with Indianapolis, where they lost Anthony Richardson and they adapted and they changed things up and they're still going basically with no issues. So it's concerning to see them. We're almost, 15, 16 weeks into this, and they still aren't adapting. They're trying to do the same thing over and over. They can't run a simple screen. They can't do the simplest things. And it's concerning. And it's going to get, if they don't fix it soon, it's going to get pretty, pretty ugly.
What do you make of, because I got to ask this, right before we're about to record this, the report of, there's internal concern, this coming from the Philly Inquirer, but there's internal concern for Jalen Hurts and the Eagles organization, saying the Eagles want their franchise quarterback to be authentic, but they also want him to open himself up a little more in the locker room and have more of an outward leadership style. That, again, coming from the Philly Inquirer, this is the dude that you paid $50 million or so for, the massive contract. And now this is coming out, like, again, all these other things that we're dealing with, just more alarms, I guess. But what do you make of that?
When it rains, it pours, because this is just more stuff coming out. We've already seen the players talking such and such on social media, whatever, questioning coaches, whatever it may be, or talking about themselves. But now we have this thing coming out with an anonymous source. I feel like anytime one of these stories comes out from the Inquirer, it's usually a bad sign. These things leaking is never a good thing. So, yeah. But like you said, this is the guy that they paid all that money to. Jalen Hurts, one of the reasons that he's so great is that he is stoic. He does stay the same. He has that standard that he talks about all the time, where he doesn't get too high, he doesn't get too low. So now you want it to be more emotional. It's just, I don't know if this is a result of him kind of calling out the team and now somebody else is kind of firing back. Maybe a coach is leaking this, who knows? But it's just, regardless, it's not a good sign. And there's really no positive that can be taken out, because do you really want him to change, or is this kind of just somebody firing back because they felt like he made like a kind of a remark against them last week?
Okay, I agree with Anthony, and honestly, hopefully this is not a mistake or a glaring issue that we come back to really regret. However, speaking of regret, it's time for the Week 16 picks, and after only going 1-2 last week, maybe we'll finally have a sweep. This week, I'm going to go with the under 40.5 in the Kansas City game versus Las Vegas. I'll also take Baltimore plus 5.5 in San Francisco. And yes, give me the Birds to finally cover a game and win in a blowout versus New York. But go ahead and let me know what best bets you guys have. As a reminder, if you haven't tried BetMGM yet, your first entry is a guaranteed win up to $1,500 when you use my link in the description. Also, while we're talking about giveaways, I still haven't heard from Danny about the 2 tickets he won to the Giants game, so I'm going to have to go with someone else. So make sure to subscribe and turn the notifications on, since I'll be going live Saturday afternoon, tomorrow, to determine who wins the tickets. All right, let me just say thank you all for supporting. It's crazy to believe how far we've come in just 10 months since starting the channel. I hope everyone has a very Merry Christmas, and let's hear those score predictions. I'm going to go with Eagles 31-17. This has been the Philly Special.